Hello and welcome to MentorSpeak. This episode we have with us Bharat Chugh. Now, Bharat is a man of many hats. He has been a judge with the Delhi judiciary for around 3.5 years. He's also been a partner in L&L Partners for 4 years. And now he's an independent counsel and is also a guest lecturer at various institutions. He's an alumnus of Jamia Millia Islamia University, and he has a very popular legal blog and is also pretty popular for his social media content. Thank you, Bharat, for coming and joining us at MentorSpeak. Thank you so much.
Thank you for having me. I've really admired your work from a distance, and I'm glad to be here. Thank you.
Great. First question I want to ask you is that for all the law students and the mid-career lawyers who are wondering what to do next, how to decide as to what can they do, please tell us your thought process about the various pivots that you've made in your career. How do you take a decision about it, or does it happen by itself? Or how do you connect the dots? And just some thought process about this, because this is it's a question that's on everybody's mind.
That's a great question. Of course, I mean, a lot of thinking goes behind taking a decision. One needs to understand where one is in terms of one's skill sets and interests, and what gives a given individual a high in life, what makes you happy. You have to look at that. You have to look at what's possibly relevant for the market, what's relevant, and there's a need and a vacuum for it in terms of the industry. And all of these things sort of get together and then help you make a decision. I've had a very unconventional,
Right.
sort of trajectory, and I love to say that it's like living like Benjamin Button. You grow up as an old man and then you sort of get younger as you go. So that was how it started for me when I started off as a judge at 23. It's a very powerful moment when you take that oath that you'll protect the Constitution and you'll uphold the laws and you'll do justice. So 23, I started off with that. I mean, I can only sort of talk about what I've seen and I've been through, and hope some inferences can be drawn, and I'll try to marshal the facts as they are. So that was, of course, well thought out. I wanted to be a judge, and a lot of sentimentality to that also. My father started off as a typist in the Sadari court. He was a stenographer and a private stenographer, and he ended up doing law in the evening batch of the law center, and then that's how he became a lawyer at a very late point in his life. And he had seen a lot of injustices in life, and he wanted to take up law and sort of give back and make a meaningful difference. And that's the kind of advocacy he did, where he would cross-subsidize, and a major portion of what my dad used to do as a lawyer was legal aid work and stuff like that. And of course, he used to charge a certain number of people so that he could finance the rest of his social advocacy initiatives. So that was the ethos that I sort of grew up with, and I started going to court with him very early on in life. I think 13, 14, I was already going to court and helping him with his briefs, with typing things out on a typewriter and later a computer, drafting, just being there when the clients are there, and strategies being discussed and all those things are happening. So that was good fun. That gave me my first exposure to law, and I thought that, okay, I am interested in law because I think that problem solving and application of something to a given fact, and coming up with solutions, and communicating and convincing somebody who's taught not to believe in you to agree with how you see the world, how you see a case. All of that was something that I liked, and I thought law is problem solving plus language and a bunch of other things, and you can use it to make a difference. So that's what made me take up judgeship, because I thought that way I can use my skill or my love for law to make a meaningful difference to people's lives. And as young people, we always sort of complain that we can't do enough. I thought as a young judge, I could sort of, pull my sleeves up and really make a difference and change things. So that was the decision. I also loved interpreting law and, playing with law and, contributing to the evolution of law, as one says. So judgeship allowed me that as well. And, but a few years into it, I sort of realized that judgeship is dear to me, but advocacy is dearer. And that possibly gives me a wider canvas or a platform to, work with, although judgeship and advocacy can't be compared, it's like comparing apples and oranges. It's very different things with different skill sets, different motivations, different expectations and roles. I realize that as a young lawyer, it's very important, and I think with your audience, it's important that in the initial few years, you have a very wide canvas and a platform to work with. It's very important for you to experience different things, for you to look at constitutional law, commercial law, criminal law, trial work, appellate work, briefing a senior, making a briefing note, cross-examining. And the diversity of experience is what goes on to, make you specialize possibly at a later point in life. So I wanted to experience all of that. As a young judge, I sometimes thought that you get to do the same thing over and over again in some of the assignments. So I thought being at the bar would allow me to, experience different legal areas, would help me, contribute to teaching. I have a passion for that, to be discussing law and sharing my ideas on it, and writing, of course. As a judge, you have certain limitations in how you can express yourself publicly on a given issue. And so I thought lawyering is the way for me, at least in the initial few years, and maybe at a later point of time, one can reassess and, realign. And that's when I came back to the bar and started off as a counsel at Luthra, and then a partner in the dispute resolution team. That was the first, shift, from judgeship to lawyering, and a lot of thought obviously went behind it. And I told you what my considerations were. Of course, at times I thought that as a judge, I was able to, make a lot of difference to people's lives on a daily basis. For example, as a trial judge, you get to decide 15, 20 bail applications on a given day. And every one of those decisions is, is a life-changing decision for somebody. A lot of futures and lives are, riding on what you have to say, and enormous opportunity to do good. So when I came back to bar, I made a pledge to myself that even if I'm practicing commercial law, white collar crime defense and all of that, I would, take out a substantial part of my schedule and my work to sort of give back in whatever capacity, whether it's by engaging with younger students who want to be judges, or younger lawyers, mentoring them, and writing about law and legal issues. So the decision was, of course, basis my skill set and what I thought would contribute more to my evolution as a better lawyer or as a better judge. So that was what it was. And then another shift, which was recent, when I, after 3.5 years of a very fulfilling stint at Luthra, where I got to do enormous and diverse kind of work, ranging from international arbitration to tech law to white collar crime defense to trial work. So after that, I decided that, it's also time to, relook and think, and come back to roots in a lot of ways. It's like a full circle for me, because dad was a litigator. I started off initially for a brief period as a litigator before I joined as a judge, and then at the law firm. So I thought it's, full circle, and I've experienced a wide cross section of different ways of looking at law. For instance, being a judge has taught me what it means to be a lawyer, what it means to be a more effective lawyer, because you see hundreds of lawyers arguing as a judge on a daily basis, right? What is an effective argument? What is an effective question in a cross examination? And conversely, being a lawyer in the last 3.5, 4 years has taught me in a lot of ways what are the expectations from a judge, how does the judge think, and what really appeals. So one has given me a sense of the other.
Right.
So, I wearing of these different hats and putting all of that experience together, I thought that it's a good time for me to be able to use this, for canvassing, issues and important cases in courts more as an arguing counsel than anything else. I'm more of a purist that way, where I like to spend time in court, and, the adrenaline that comes with, arguing a difficult matter, convincing a difficult judge who's hardwired and taught not to believe in you, and cross-examining a tough witness, and all those things. So I wanted to come back to that, and been a few months, and never a dull day. Yeah, I'm really sorry if I've just meandered and not sort of touched upon your question at all.
Absolutely not.
Yeah.
Very, very insightful, I must say, because honestly, I have not come across a person who's gone backwards, right? Everybody starts as a practicing counsel, then senior counsel, and then a judge. You have just now reversed it. So it's absolutely great to hear what you have to say, because faced from law students, and when I interact with them, they always say, how do I choose the area that I want to work on, or how do I choose whether I want to do in a law firm or an in-house counsel? And my answer to them is always that, don't choose, just do everything, whatever comes your way, do that. Most of us, and I think that most would be like 99% of us, never set out to do by planning what we're doing. So we've just reached where we are by through our various paths. So that's great to hear, what you have to say. Since, we're on the question of, judgeship and all, I'd like to understand from you, and for students who are interested in a career as a judge, any tips and any insights on, how to crack the judiciary services, or is there certain particular skill sets or some kind of assessment one should do, or to know if they're, they're suitable to be a judge, or any kind of, aptitudes. Basically, if I'm a student now, how can what should I look at if I want to decide that whether I want to be a judge or not?
Sure. So two parts of a question. One is an understanding of what the role of a trial judge is. I think that's important, because sometimes, I've seen it that people are just fascinated with the idea of being a judge, without a very real understanding of what it means to be a magistrate or a civil judge, right? And what do you do on an everyday basis? That's what I call the role of a judge broadly. And once you've figured that out, once you've seen it, either by reading about the lives of trial court judges, or interacting with them, or interning with them, and spending a lot of time in trial courts, that's one, for you to know what it means to be a trial judge. And then you of course decide if this is something that you find engaging and fulfilling. And once you've done that, then it's the how part of it. How do you go about achieving that objective? How do you prepare? What do you read? And how do you plan your time? So I'll take the first one first, because I think that's more important.
Yes.
And also, I'm glad you put me that question, because I think that's also a part which is sort of neglected. Because not many people have spoken about the life of a trial judge. Not many trial judges, in fact, have written their memoirs or something which actually gives a sense to people of what they do on a daily basis. What are the kind of challenges? What are the kind of cases that they decide? The conundrums, the difficult decisions, the pulls and pressures. All of that. So, if you're taking the decision or thinking about judgeship, the first thing is that why do you want to be a judge, right? That's most important. As somebody said, if you figure out the why, you will figure out the how. How is not that important, because when you figure out the why, then things would keep motivating you from within. So one is, of course, you do not take up judgeship, in order to have a stable job, or bragging rights that I'm a judge, or a beacon as it used to be a couple of years back. So if it's a power kick that one's looking for, then of course not. I mean, if you're a power junkie or an authority junkie, then you possibly wouldn't be the right candidate for judgeship. Judgeship is a service more than anything else. A public servant. You've sort of dedicated your life to the good of people. Of course, there's a security that comes with it. There's a stability that comes with it. There's a certain amount of dignity attached to the office. All of that comes with it. But those are not your considerations. Your considerations are using your skills as a lawyer to make a difference and to give back. It is a service. Every time you're making a decision, you go back to what Gandhi said, that you keep in mind the last person. Is your decision going to make his or her life better in any way or not? And that's your moral compass. That's what's there before you're making a decision. And that's the only way you will be a responsive judge or a sensitive judge. So if you need to figure out that part. Do you have it in you to serve? And I'll tell you why it is important, because after a few years or after a few months, you'll realize that that is what would keep you going. With what the job entails, if you have a higher purpose, if you want to really make a difference. And once you've decided, and of course you need to interact with a lot of judges, try interning with as many civil judges and magistrates, not just in Delhi, because Delhi, I'll tell you, is a different ballgame altogether. If you go to the states, in some of the states, for example, in Bihar or in Jharkhand, you'll get to know that a trial court judge works in very, very difficult circumstances. Sometimes you wouldn't have the infrastructure. You would have to write your order sheets with a hand. You do not have a proper courtroom. You'll have a roof that's leaking water. Even today, in
Yes,
2020
I
as
know.
we speak.
I have a
So,
batchmate
so,
who's
but
a judge. Yes, in one of the
yeah.
courts. Yeah, yeah. I know what you're talking about.
So I think it's important for, aspirants to engage and look at all of this, number one. Then, of course, once you think that this is for you, and it's an extraordinary opportunity. I mean, there is a part of me that still misses, being able to do all that justice on a daily basis. But then I like to pay my dues by working with younger people who would go on to become judges, and many of my students have. It's almost like living vicariously through them, so I get to live those twin lives. So experience it, spend a lot of time reading about it, thinking about it, and once you've made that decision, then of course, what is very important is your understanding of law. You need to master your bare acts, you need to know how to read a law, you need to understand the basic rules of interpretation, you need to have a very good command over the first principles of law. For example, the Contract Act, unjust enrichment, everything sort of boils down to that. CPC, CRPC, Evidence Act are extremely important because as a trial court judge, you'll be using these more than anything else.
Right.
So pay a lot of attention to it in law school. Of course, there would be a time after law school when you've read those basic laws, then you'll get into that intensive, phase of preparation. That what strategy to be adopted in that phase would depend a lot on which state are you aiming at. Different states have different expectations and exam patterns. For instance, if you talk about Delhi Judicial Services, it's a very practical exam.
Okay.
It would really put you in the driving seat. When you're taking the exam, it would ask you to write judgments, write daily orders, write frame charges, pass sentence orders. So it
Okay.
would not be a very, very academic sort of exam. They
Hmm.
would give you the facts, they'll give you the evidence, they'll give you the contentions of either party, and they'll ask you to decide.
Oh, wow.
And in those 3 hours exam, they'd possibly ask you to write 3 judgments and 3 orders and frame, charges in 2 criminal cases, which is a lot.
Yeah.
And very interesting too, because that's what really tests you. You're not just somebody who's understood the law and learned it. You are somebody who can solve a practical problem, apply
And
the law to a
mm,
given nuanced practical situation and come up with the solutions, and you have that thinking ability, objectivity, impartiality, and the ability to appreciate evidence, and you have all of that. It tests you on those skills which are extremely important. So your command over your laws, your understanding of precedent, interpretation, and your ability to drive at the very essence of law in a given case, I think, and your ability to sift the chaff from the grain, as we call it, that's the most important thing that a judge should have, to sift the relevant from the irrelevant and do it, quickly. Of course, you acquire that, and very, very experienced judges can do it in the blink of an eye. But for
mm,
younger people, when appreciating evidence, you need to develop and read more and more and more. And apart from your understanding of law, of course, you need to be somebody who believes in the Constitution, who understand what the ethos of our Constitution is, because you would be a soldier of the Constitution, right? You'll be
mm,
serving the Constitution with every decision that you make and every judgment that you write. And finally, of course, the importance of language cannot be emphasized enough, because you speak through your judgments and your orders, and
mm,
a judge. And I think that's true for anything that's got anything to do with law, right? As a lawyer, of course, there's a greater emphasis on oral advocacy and your ability to mold a will by how you say
mm.
it. But as a judge, of course, writing well, communicating effectively, having a certain command over language is very, very important. So this is like the broad,
But
sense of what's the expectation. Of course, each of those would have many, many subparts, and I spent
mhm.
hours and hours, unpacking each of those, and maybe we'll take these up in detail someday. But
Right.
yeah, this is the broad sense.
Right, right, right. Well, that was very helpful. It was new to me, honestly. I never looked at this as a career option, but now it seems very, very interesting, and something I say very frankly that when I was in law school, I should have had a bit more open mind. While I didn't have one, I was very focused in a law firm and all of that. That's how law students are usually brought up on. But I wish I had that open mind to explore all the various opportunities that are there for a law student, right? So yeah, that's great.
So you'll make a fantastic judge. Should you take that up?
Okay, now was coming to the next question. I was wondering if you could tell us, according to you, what are the skill sets which a law student can work on, while he's in college, apart from the usual studies and extracurriculars. Because we all know that the legal profession demands a lot more than what you're taught in college. So is there anything specific that they can do or they can work on, which will help him later in the profession?
Right. Uh, that's a great question. I wish we had more guidance, or I personally had more guidance when we were back in law school. So I think a bunch of things. Apart from, of course, your internships and moot courts, I'm not gonna delve on
Yeah.
that much because that's done and dusted. Uh, I think it's important for you to write a lot. I personally found legal writing and effective legal writing articles and columns and to be a great equalizer. If you're a young lawyer, that's, I think, the best way to get noticed in a
Yes.
profession that's, some people say, and it's true, is extremely hierarchical and sometimes not seen as providing a truly level playing field. So write as much as you can. It would help in multiple ways. Writing, number one, forces you to think clearly. When I'm writing down to, sitting down to write a column on a given legal issue, I'm thinking a lot about it. I'm reading about it. It is forcing me to re-examine my own conclusions, and it helps me with the ability to put a point forth effectively in the least amount of words, and to generally be persuasive in my and deft in my use of language, which is what the profession is at the heart of it, whether it's judgeship or lawyering, right?
Right.
Um, or so it write a lot and write about issues, of course, not hackneyed issues that people have been writing about for years and years. Of course, you'll have to identify a vacuum where you can make a meaningful contribution, and then do good research, write about it effectively. For instance, if I am sitting as somebody who's a recruiter who's looking for a younger counsel to help me with, I obviously would hardly look at the law college and other things. I would definitely look at somebody who's thinking about what's new in law, who's applying his or her mind on those legal issues and making an attempt to contribute to our understanding of things, and who can really, add value to the way I look at a matter or a practice area. So writing is very important. And again, for writing, you need to read a lot. You can't be a great writer unless you're an avid reader, because the more you read, the better that you write. So the reading extensively is important. Again, in uh, today's day and age, and this certainly makes me sound older than I am, but the attention spans are short,
Yeah.
and I don't think we are sitting with our books as much as we should. And whether it's fiction or non-fiction or economics or psychology, philosophy, poetry, and we are not spending that much time with books. And very important for law students to do that because of how interdisciplinary the profession is.
Right.
Everything is connected to the other. You can't really argue uh, a constitutional law matter or even a white collar crime defense case without understanding how a share subscription agreement works. How a call option works in an agreement, and if there is a dispute on an FDI issue or a FEMA issue which has led to a criminal prosecution, you won't understand it or be able to effectively defend your clients or argue a proposition unless you have a wider sense of what the economics of the issue is, how do markets operate, what are the incentives that people operate on, a general understanding of people, for instance. And these are the skills that you need to have. For example, if you're after law school, you're engaging with a client, you have to manage expectations, you have to get the truth out from the client, you have to effectively communicate with the client, handhold the client. You need to have an understanding of people, right? Of course, you'll get an understanding of people, and it is a life skill that you acquire over a number of years. But reading is a good proxy for it.
Right.
For
Absolutely.
example, the 10 years that you'll spend at the bar trying to understand things, a lot of it can also be understood from books, right? It's like looking at the world from the shoulders of giants. Of all the people who've led lives before me, I can read a book and have a conversation with Steve Jobs. I can read a book and have a conversation with Leonardo da Vinci on what he thought life was, what he
True.
thought people were. So it's very important for you to step into the lives of other people and understand what other people think, like the quality of otherness. And I think that's what books do for me. And I think that's why books are important. And I look for that in a younger colleague who's willing to, or, desiring to join and work with me. How extensively do they read? And because that obviously reflects in your worldview, your expression, your writing, and everything. So spend a lot of time. And don't think of fiction as a waste, for example, a waste of time, because the kind of life lessons that you learn from fiction possibly are not the ones that you can read or learn in law commentaries, for example. You can choose to look at life from the perspective of a young girl in Afghanistan by reading Khalid Hosseini. You can read The Art of Racing in the Rain, which I was recently reading, and look at it life from the perspective of a dog, for example. That sense of otherness. To Kill a Mockingbird, for instance, what it means to be a colored man, in America, facing a trial when the whole town is possibly against you, and those speeches. So it's important for you to get at that. Again, zeroing in on circling back to your question, communicating, writing effectively, and staying ahead of the curve. You know, I don't think the legal profession has changed in the last few decades as much as it has changed in the last 5 years. Struggling to keep pace with how fast the changes are with tech, with AI, with big data, with cryptocurrency, with IBC, and COVID's going to change things even further dramatically. So it's important for you to have your basic principles intact, but at the same time, feel free to innovate and change and learn. And I think that's where young people who've sort of grown with technology have an edge. They have that adaptability as well. As somebody said, you need to cannibalize yourself before somebody else cannibalizes you. You should be totally okay to ensure that, okay, today I have a skill set which may not be relevant 5 years from now or 2 years from now. Let me cannibalize myself and start afresh, or change to a different practice area, and segue into it beautifully, and provide a solution that the client is going to need, or provide a solution that the government is going to need if you're working in policy, or provide a solution which the court is going to expect from you if you're an arguing counsel, or a foreign client would expect from you if they want to navigate this fast changing space. So staying ahead of the curve, reading up a lot, and being, of course, a technocrat. I don't think there is any, earlier it used to be an option. Now you can't be a Luddite. You'll have to embrace technology and work with it, and keep changing. Yeah.
I cannot agree more when you say that you should read as much as you can. Just this last week, I was talking on LinkedIn about this, that one must read as varied. Like I always read a lot of fiction. I have been a very avid reader from childhood, and even as a law student, I used to read so much fiction, so much non-law books, non-fiction, which is non-law, all kinds of books, and they really help. So let me just ask you, what is your favorite non-law book which you think has kind of helped you as a lawyer, or given you some edge as a lawyer?
Interesting question. Hard to sort of name one.
He has many.
Many. Okay, sure. So I think Will Durant's story of philosophy has really helped me, try and interpret the world a little better. I feel. I think philosophy is important because you learn how to think, you learn how to critically think, you learn how to not be in a willing state of suspension of disbelief. You learn to question everything and temper everything with doubt. And that's what we do as a lawyer. That's what I tell my younger colleagues, that never take anything at face value. Just because the president says in a para, this is the law, no, question it. Of course, you'll have to abide by the president at the end of the day, but you also need to distinguish things. You also need to be able to go behind things. So the story of philosophy is essentially Will Durant. I mean, he's one of the best minds ever. He summarized like 3,000 years of civilization and thought, and questions about what's life, and spirituality, metaphysics, and all of that, ethics. What does it mean to lead a good life? What does it mean to lead an examined life? He summarized all those philosophers in one great volume, his Story of Civilization, which is an 11-volume work, which I'm still sort of traversing through, is a great one. Other than that, I've loved reading about India. For instance, something that's closer and more accessible, maybe India After Gandhi by Guha, where he takes, post-independence Indian history and whatever has happened, and tells you, how our constitution has worked out, what was the vision of the constitution makers, how democracy functions in a country like ours, how did successive governments worked, how the constitution was amended a number of times. What were the problems with princely states? How did we include them into the fold of the country? What were the challenges there? Different institutions, how they work. So it's a very good, interpreter of what India is, and a great lens to look at our country with, which informs your worldview. If you're trying to make sense of the world and trying to make sense of the world for your clients and for your court and for your, students or the regulator, it's important for you to understand what is the structure of our country. So these books have really helped me, and then the lives of great judges like Oliver Wendell Holmes, or of course there are certain things that one may find a bit problematic about what the great judge has said. Not getting into that, but again, you can choose to draw inspiration from certain people while at the same time questioning them, which is the way it should be. You do not get into that hero worship. So Justice Krishna, you are closer to home. Justice Bhagwati, Palkhiwala, Mr. Nariman. So you read about these lives. This is H.R. Khanna. You draw inspiration, and out of law, Steve Jobs, for instance, Leonardo Da Vinci, all these guys, how they've brought in, their understanding of different disciplines to create the products that they did. For example, Steve Jobs was excellent at calligraphy and meditation and the Buddhist philosophy, and that really went on to mold the Apple products and the way they are, molded aesthetically. And the fonts that Mac started off with were inspired all from calligraphy. The design of the MacBook was inspired from Zen philosophy of minimalism, and they didn't the curved edges. So somebody who brought in different disciplines to create a product that sort of changed the world, right? Leonardo da Vinci was somebody similar, who was a painter, who was a writer, who was war strategic guy, a sculptor, many hats, and all of that, helped him put together something like the Mona Lisa, right? His understanding of lightning, his understanding of the anatomy, how a human eye functions. So yeah, I mean, I can go on and
I
on
know.
and on.
I think this can be an episode in itself, where this
Absolutely.
we have to kind of have more discussion on this. But anyway, coming back
should do that.
to our present topic, just one last question. Because I talked about legal writing, and even I totally agree with you that writing good articles and getting them published are a great way to earn, brownie points for your CV and to learn some amazing legal skills. So just want to understand from you, what you think make up a good publication worthy legal article, and your thoughts on that.
That's a great question. Number one, of course, is relevance. It should be contextual. It should be something that educates people or helps them understand a given issue. That's number one. Second, of course, novelty. Not many people should have written about it. It should fulfill a need. Third, of course, is simplicity. It's very important for you to, as law students, we get really fascinated with Latin maxims and, difficult ways of saying a thing. So simplicity is very important. Accessibility, you need to combine academic rigor with accessibility. You can't make your article simplistic, because if you're making a nuance point on a legal issue which is very subtle, then you'll have to, of course, make that point, right? If you're distinguishing like 5 different judgments, you can't make that simplistic, but at the same time it still has to be accessible. And that's the key, and that's the skill of a lawyer, right? To take a very difficult and complex sort of a situation and lay it out there beautifully so that somebody can see it happening. The classic rules of creative writing, where you show, you don't tell.
Right.
As Anton Chekhov said, that don't tell me how the moon shines, show me the glint on a shard of broken glass. You need to show, you need to make it come alive for the reader. For example, start with the concrete, start with, okay, this is what happened. Let me take you there. Once upon a time sort of a storytelling. That works remarkably for an article. That works remarkably for, an argument in the court. If you say, okay, picture this. A went to B, and this is what happened, and that's how you let the article flow. You've got the reader, by the scruff of their neck from the very go. So try writing like that. I see that's something that's been neglected. We sort of made legal writing very, very arcane and,
Very
difficult to understand,
formula
boring as
driven.
well.
Yeah.
Yeah, and we, in the process, we put a lot of people off. That's also led to, a bankruptcy of thought in many, many ways. So I think we need to sort of pay more attention to make it accessible and write in interesting ways. And I personally think that most of clumsy legal writing comes from clumsy thinking,
Right.
because at some level it's impossible to separate good writing from clear thinking. If you think clearly, you'll be forced to write clearly, or you'll write clearly, and in the process of writing you'll start thinking clearly. So it's like a very good virtuous circle. So think what you are going to write on a lot before you sort of get down to doing it. Sometimes we just get down to writing, and then in the process try to
That's what.
see where it takes you. That may work out well with fiction sometimes, because then you talk about characters, and the characters take a life of their own, and then in a sense the story chooses you and you do not choose the story.
Right.
But that's different. So if you're writing non-fiction and you're writing a column on a legal issue, need to be simple about it. And I think there's one rule that's really helped me, and I try to work on it, is that don't write a line which you cannot say out aloud in a in a room full of your friends, legal or non-legal. I mean, if I can't say it aloud, I won't write it.
Okay.
And that, I think, is sometimes a good check on not writing clumsy phrases, which is written with passive voice, too many words, too many complex sentences. If I can't say it out aloud, without people rolling their eyes on me at a party, I won't write it on a paper. And that keeps it conversational, that keeps it fun, and the shortest distance between 2 points is a straight line. Life is too short. I mean, the judge doesn't have the time, or the patience for a leisurely meditation on where you are going with this point. No, the reader doesn't have that. We are living in a state of information glut. It is not a state where we do not have information. The problem is too much information, and the idea is to try and make sense of all of that information. And your article or your column is supposed to help the reader sort of do that. So the shortest distance between 2 points is a straight line. Get to the point.
Right.
Develop the art of storytelling. The best lawyers in the country are people who are extraordinary storytellers. They can take a very drab issue of interpretation of an income tax act provision and then create a story around it. As a Lord Denning also used to do. For people who are, I missed Lord Denning out when I was talking about people who sort of had a transformative influence in how I look at writing and advocacy and judgeship. He was one. He would take a very complex legal issue and break it down so beautifully. He would write a judgment on tax law and he would say, so John is a farmer, or John is a fisherman. This is where he fishes, and this is what he catches. This is subject to tax, and this is what the tax rate is. The question that arises for consideration is, what should be the rate at which it should be taxed? It's beautiful, a tax judgment. I mean, I haven't seen any other tax judgment being written like that. So look at that. And finally, I'd sort of stop there by making this point that when you're writing, if you're writing something that's it's not a single point that you're making, you are exploring a larger area of law. Try to emulate this formula that somebody sort of worked with. You need to first answer who the parties are, or what the characters here are. Then you will have to get into the question of where, when, and how. Where did it happen, how did it happen, and when did it happen. Okay, you need to tell the reader this, whether it's a briefing note. Let me extrapolate this, whether it's a briefing note to your senior, whether it's a briefing of a senior counsel that you have to do. You have to tell them who are the characters, or if it's a court, you're making an argument, who are the characters, when did this happen, where did this happen, and how did this happen. And then ask the question, what do you want the court to do, what do you want the reader to look at. And then finally, why should the court agree with you? Why should the reader believe what you're arguing in your article? So if you've got these few questions figured out in terms of a broad metric, who, when, where, and how, and then what do you want the court to do, and why should the court agree with you, you'll realize that in answering these questions, you made a complete legal article, or you made a complete argument, or you made a good note, and you've already answered so many questions which the reader would have, which the judge should have, or the client would have, or an audience in the class would have. So, I mean, it's obviously too broad, legal writing, of course, is pleadings, your conveyancing, your column writing, judgment writing, all of them would require slightly different skill set and approaches. But on a broad philosophical principle level, these
Mm.
rules have sort of, helped me. And another metric, I'll just take 2 minutes with it. And I
Sure.
personally read this and found this to be, very, very useful.
Mm.
Whenever you're approaching a writing assignment, it's good to again look at it in terms of different stages. The first stage, let's call it, and I think this is a philosophy by Betty Sue. Uh, Approach the writing as a madman. The first stage, where you are just putting down ideas on a piece of paper that you want to write about in a non-linear fashion. For
Mm.
example, I want to write about contract. I would write about specific performance, offer
Mm.
acceptance, fundamentals,
Mm.
consent. I'll put them all down on a paper.
Mm.
Then and spend some time thinking about it, and just putting it down on paper. Then obviously the architect comes in, and the
Mm.
architect would sort of structure them in headings, and make some
Mm.
structure out of the madness of ideas that's there on the paper.
Mm.
Then once you've got the broad ideas on paper and headings and some scheme, then the carpenter comes in and fills in all the details and fleshes the entire article out. This is
Mm.
where the actual writing is
Happens.
done. And
Mm.
then finally you open the door to the judge, who would come and look at the article. And all of this is you. Okay, these are different
Uh-huh.
roles that you are playing on your article.
Yes.
And the
Yes.
judge is going to come in and critically examine everything that you've written and ask you questions. Why have you written this? And this should
Mm.
be this, and this can be done better. So, this combination of a madman, an architect, a carpenter, and a judge for any legal writing is extremely useful, or any piece of
True.
writing, because then it
True.
makes it complete. Now, but you'll have to be careful on how much time you give to each of those characters. For example, if you have 10-minute writing slot, give 3 minutes possibly to the madman, because the
Mm.
ideas are important. Idea is what,
Mm.
is the essence.
Mm.
Then give 2 minutes to the architect for him to, do a scheme. Then
Mm.
3 minutes to the carpenter to come and flesh out the details, and then 1 or 2 minutes to the judge at the very end. This is important because sometimes when you're writing an article and you've got some broad ideas on paper, if you let the judge in too early,
Mm.
then the judge would start examining everything critically, even before you've had time to fashion it.
True.
So, thinking of these things in terms of methods and, these
Mm.
is always helpful as a
Mm.
framework. Gives you some direction. But then again, if some people do it naturally, for,
Mm.
for 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 people like me who've had to work hard to write something readable, I've had to do this. But some people are brilliant writers naturally. It flows like that in a logical
Mm.
fashion for them, and if it does, then nothing like it, of course. I'm sorry, I completely lose sense of where we started off, and then one thing takes us to the other.
But I have to say that the
I'm just
question metric was very, very interesting. I have never really thought about it that way, but I kind of agree with you. I have a similar technique about that. What will I say in a room full of people? So what I do after I've written something, I read it out loud. So then I catch, if I'm not able to read it properly, there's no flow, I will know. But when you're writing, you tend to lose the sense of flow. You write, you think, oh, this is looking very nice. But one should always read out loud after they've written. So that is something similar, I think, what you practice. And yeah, the
Yeah.
madman
And
architect.
something remarkable, just one thing there,
Yeah,
you made
sure.
a very great point. Reading it out aloud also gives you a sense of punctuation and,
Yeah.
those pregnant pauses, for example, if you're talking about roko mat jane do, right?
Mm-hmm.
If you're writing it, you may say roko mat, comma, jane do. Or,
Mm-hmm.
if you're speaking out loud, you'll say roko, mat jane do.
Yeah.
So, the process of saying it aloud, you
Yeah.
possibly change, the sense of it. And one thing, also when you're reading it aloud,
Mm.
also more of your senses get involved. And
True.
maybe that's the reason sometimes audiobooks and podcasts as a medium are so much more effective. They are more
Yes.
intense and, sort of medium where different senses are involved, and
Mm.
you're compelled to imagine in
Mm.
your head of what it is. And the one last thing on writing is to
Mm.
not fall in love with your writing too much. I think you touched on your point that sometimes when you're written it on paper, it looks so good. When
Mm.
you read it out aloud or somebody else reads it, and
Mm.
then you think, oh damn, it wasn't as awesome as I thought it
Mm.
was. You fall
Yes.
in love with your own words as a
Yeah.
lawyer or a writer. So it's important to kill your darlings. It's important to, that's as the writer said, that
Yeah.
sometimes the thing that you think is the best phrase you've written, please
Mm.
feel flexible or be flexible to take it off. And of course, have, a good fresh pair of eyes to look at everything
Yeah.
that you write. I mean, I have a lot of people that I really trust, and it's never that I send out anything anymore for
Mm.
publication before I've had a few people look at it, because
Right.
that sort of objectivity is important.
Yes, yes. So what I do is usually I take a break after first draft. I take some break, mental break, also physical time break, and then I come back and edit. So then I'm no more, just after you've written it, no, it feels like a labor of love. You don't feel like chopping anything, but after you've given it some time, you can always go back and look at it objectively. So yes, I think that was great. That was very, very helpful. One last question. I mean, I know you have a great blog and I've read it. It's very, very helpful. Are you open for submission from students and other people on your blog?
Sure. I mean, we've had some guest posts. Would love to carry something that's broadly aligned with the function and the scheme of the blog. Happy to carry it. Yeah.
Great, great. So I mean, that would be awesome for my readers. I'll put a link to Bharat's website, so you can always go check it out. And thank you, Bharat, so much. It was an amazing conversation. Amazing. Thank you so much.
Thank you for having me.